This light shining today. Look at it. Looks like I'm in heaven. Okay. All right, you people, let's start. Let's go. What should we do first, Rebecca? Or who is there, Nicole? No, Rebecca, you're leading it. What should we do? Okay, good. Fantastic. All right. So we just think, as always, we think. Well, hello, there's, look at Dechen, you're there. Who's in Portugal? Who's there? Who's translating in Portugal? Who are you in Portugal? What's her name? I don't know you. Nicole, Rebecca.
It's Danny.
Okay. Oh, and there's Kelsang in Spain. Good, you people. Wonderful. So we start with reminding ourselves, those of us who already feel like we're Buddhists, we reiterate our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second two lines, we state our purpose for being together, stating this marvelous altruistic motivation that we're going to listen to these teachings so that we can develop our amazing potential, so we can become a Buddha, so we can then, of course, our job be of benefit to every single sentient being without exception. That's why we're sitting here together. As His Holiness Dalai Lama always says, always aspire to do what is most beneficial, and if we can, long-term, better than short-term. Well, you can't get something, you can't get anything longer-term than Buddhahood, can we? All right. Sangye Chadang Soke Chognam La Jancho Badu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chernien Gipes Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drubpa Shog Sangye Chadang Soke Chognam La Jancho Badu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chernien Gipes Sonam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drubpa Shog. So what we're saying is, until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And from the virtuous karmic imprints that we will leave in our mind from listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha to be of benefit to all. Let's do that then. Okay, well, this is the last of our series on the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. And again, just to remind us always to give the big picture is always so important. Excuse me, I'm drinking my morning tea, so usually I have it early, but today I didn't have it early. So I'm going to be having a mouthful every now and again. So, okay. So the big picture here is Lama Tsongkhapa's marvelous packaging of Buddha's teachings, which is coming from Lama Atisha in the 11th century, which of course is coming back to the Nalanda tradition, these amazing geniuses in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century. That's the source of all the teachings that the Tibetan Buddhist monastic university is based on, as His Holiness repeatedly tells us. We are part of the Nalanda tradition. It's wonderful to see the lineage, not just some hippie trippy thing someone made up because they had a dream, which is how we think of spiritual. So embarrassing. So, and then going right back to the Buddha and these amazing lineages, One of the things with the Tibetans when they give teachings, and especially sometimes when they publish the books, they would give this entire family tree going back to the Buddha. It's very encouraging, So, okay, this packaging is, we're talking about the 6 perfections, which is the final stages of the Bodhisattva path. And the part we're teaching is the last of those 6 perfections. So there are 6 of those. So the 6 perfections, the 6 perfections, the first 4, if we use the analogy of a bird needing 2 wings, and I love this, and it covers the entire path to enlightenment, then this final stages of the Bodhisattva path is the final stages of the compassion wing. And the first part of the compassion wing is the accomplishment of bodhichitta, this amazing paradigm shift in the mind where now only others exist for us. And the last stages of the final stages of the Bodhisattva path, the compassion wing, are these 6 perfections. So having got bodhicitta, these amazing great bodhisattvas bop along from life to life to life, perfecting the first 4, generosity, morality, patience, and perseverance, which we've talked about, perfecting the compassion wing, and then in their meditation with concentration, which we talked about last week, they will perfect the final one, where all the teachings come together. Everything in the teaching, starting in junior school, grade 1, lead to this. The accomplishment of the insight into the ultimate way that things exist, where we finally cut the delusions that have been the source of all our suffering, so that we can finally combine with that bodhicitta to become a Buddha. But all of this, the compassion wing, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. So the wisdom wing is all the nuts and bolts of the earlier stages of the path, that in one way of talking are what that we are the beneficiary of. You can argue that, the compassion wing is about others, but you could argue that the first stage is the wisdom wing is all about us. Now that feels weird to us sometimes in the West. We think it sounds a bit selfish, but how can you possibly help others if you haven't put yourself together? If you rush around, I have to help people play music. I've got to help people play music, and you don't even know music yourself. How foolish. You need wisdom. It's pretty clear. As Lama Zopa says, meaning well is not enough. I mean, we make a mess in our lives because we mean well, but we don't have the wisdom to know how. And don't make wisdom something high in the sky. Wisdom is just common sense. And we're finally getting to the ultimate common sense, which is the reality of how things exist. So the first stages, we have to start, preparing ourselves for these final stages. Like any body of knowledge, all the stages are integrated, aren't they? And logical and incremental and progressive. Well, that's what this Lam Rim is. So as we've been talking already, one of the ways of framing all of Buddha's views of the universe, all of Buddha's teachings, is in terms of wisdom and getting wisdom and stopping ignorance. And why would we want to do that? We think of wisdom as some clever person who knows a lot about math or something. We're happy for them. But we can see in our world, having that wisdom doesn't help you become a happy person. It doesn't, you still be neurotic and ridiculous. So that wisdom is not what Buddha's talking about. He is talking about that wisdom. But this wisdom has to be rooted in ethics. It has to be rooted in methods to get happy. So the Buddhism is a method to get happy and stop suffering. Buddhism is absolutely rooted in good ethics. That's the start, junior school, entry level, grade 1. And the method to get happy, this is so curious to us. The method to get happy and stop suffering is to see things how they exist. Why? Because Buddha's fundamental point from the beginning to the end, this is the unique approach of Buddhism. And until we get this, we don't understand Buddhism. Is that we suffer because to the extent to which we are caught up in neuroses, the extent to which we're caught up in this very clear packaging of Buddha's teachings that we learn about in the wisdom wing, the extent to which we're caught up in all the neurotic states of mind, the deluded states of mind, the disturbing states of mind, the afflictions, as they say in Sanskrit and Tibetan. The extent to which we're caught up in them is 1, the extent to which we suffer, but 2, the extent to which we're living in la-la land, because they lie to us, and so we harm sentient beings and have all the wrong understanding of how the universe is. So we're living in la-la land. We're up a creek without a paddle. We've lost the plot. So the extent to which we're caught up in delusions, misconceptions, which are disturbing emotions, which are afflictions, is the extent to which we suffer, absolutely, and the extent to which we make a mess of others, harm others, and which is the extent to which we then suffer in the future and keep going like maniacs. So getting wisdom is the way to get happiness. It's a big surprise to us. We would never think this in our culture. You don't go to university to learn math because it's the method to get happy, I mean, we think it will. We're hoping it will. We do everything with that wish. We all want happiness. This is very clear from the Buddha's point of view. We all want happiness. We all don't want suffering, but he just tells us we've got the wrong methods. And we learn especially about that in junior school and high school. And that's the nuts and bolts of all of Buddha's teachings, his views of the universe, karma, and the mind. And who's the beneficiary of this? Directly, you are the beneficiary. Of course, as Lama Zopa says, the rats and roaches will also be benefited, but they're the indirect beneficiary. They will have a party because you leave them in peace. Now, the compassion wing is the final stages, and we're prepared from the very beginning, like I often say, in the very first stages of practice. The explicit teaching is simply back off and don't harm sentient beings. Why not, Buddha? Because petal, everything you think and do and say programs you and produces your future suffering and happiness. So it's a method. You stopping harming others is a method for you to be happy. That's a big surprise for us. Initially, that's what it is. You are the direct beneficiary. And if we don't get this, we don't understand Buddhism. And we don't like this in the West because we think it sounds selfish. No, it's not. It's intelligent. You've got to first understand why you're suffering. And you get that in the Four Noble Truths, which is the framework for the first, second scopes, junior school, high school, first and second scopes, junior, low scope, middle scope, the wisdom wing. Then we're ready now to get to the, so we first start controlling our body and speech, the servants of our mind, the slaves of our mind, if you like, as Lama Zopa says. We harness them first because they're out of control. Why? Because the mind's out of control. So the explicit teaching is be a nice person, back off, don't harm others, mind your own business. And then you get to high school, you start to look into the problem, the root problem, which is the mind. And now we start to understand the neurotic states of mind, the afflictions, the delusions, this nonsense. And this is a very specific view of the Buddhas, so specific to the Buddha. We think we know what anger, love, compassion, kindness. We might have our own definitions, but you better know Buddhas if you want to be a Buddhist, okay? So specific. We start to identify attachment. And then we start to get renunciation. Well, Lama Zopa says, you have got renunciation. You have got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment, just the thought of another moment of attachment is so repulsive, so disgusting. It's like being in a septic tank. So that we should be very humble from that, because that shows us how far we have to go. And it shows us when we really start to understand Buddha's view, we really start to understand Buddha's view of what samsara is. When we really start to understand the depth of this attachment, we'll be very humble, we'll be very patient, because it's way, way, way more subtle than we can even imagine, you know. So we really got to work hard, and we start to understand our minds, start to see what drives our neuroses and what drives our misery and what causes us, therefore, to harm others. This is the wisdom wing. Incredible. So how would you be if you accomplished the wisdom wing, even to some degree? How would you be? You'd be joyful. You'd be amazing. You'd be stable. You'd be in charge of your mind. You'd have some level of concentration, like we talked last week. You'd be unbelievable. You'd be a joyful, fulfilled, content, self-respectful person. No, you wouldn't be a victim anymore. You've given up incredible levels of attachment and anger and fears and drama, which are the voices of ego, the voices of self-pity, as Lama Yeshe puts it. You'd be stable, content, fulfilled. You'd be an amazing human being, and you'd have lots of love and compassion, no question. But if you want to finish there, if you're on the Theravadan path, you've gone that far. You graduated high school. You now get your concentration, you get shamatha, like we talked last week, you use it to realize emptiness and some life or other, you achieve you remove all the delusions, the obstacles to liberation, you achieve liberation from suffering and its causes. You'd be a sublime, incredible, holy being. You can't imagine how you'd be. And then at that in particular life, because you've been driven by the goal of getting out of samsara, get the hell out of samsara. You understand a samsara, and you want to get the hell out of samsara. And your goal is that. You've developed love and compassion, there's no question. How could you not have love and compassion if you've got rid of attachment and anger? Of course, so that's all that's left. But at the end of that life in which you've achieved your liberation, you'll zap, driven by your goal, you'll zap into bliss and won't come back. And then one day or other, Buddha will come along and tap you on the shoulder and say, okay, petal, now get off, come out of this bliss and get onto the bodhisattva path and become a Buddha, please. And one Lama said, coming out of that state of bliss is the worst suffering in the universe. It's very interesting. But here we're on the compassion wing. We don't graduate at high school. We keep going. And why? Because we're motivated by the goal of becoming a Buddha. So you keep going, and then you enter into so this first stage is explicitly, you've gotten rid of your own suffering. You've quit your own suffering. You've quit your own suffering. Very clear. You become a joyful person. But what you're doing is preparing yourself, for the later stages. So now you get to the compassion wing and you start to realize, oh my God, everybody's in the same boat. We're all crazy. We're all driven by delusions. We're all suffering. We're all demented. We're all driving around with our body and speech, making a mess, So you see the suffering so hugely in your own mind. Now how can you bear to think that you can't help others as well? So you keep going, keep going, keep going. So and then we get to the final stages. Like I said, we've been through these stages already. And now we're in the final stages of the compassion wing, the 6 perfections, going from life to life, perfecting the first 4 in relation to sentient beings, perfecting the compassion wing, and now the wisdom wing. Last week, we talked about, again, a bit of background, as we've been talking now, and we talked about concentration. So as Lama says, as we mentioned last week, excuse me, my cup of tea, 4 tea bags, 2 Irish breakfast tea, 2 green tea, a splash of a particular Indian spiced green tea chai, 3 spoons of honey, manuka. What else? And yeah, I don't drink milk anymore. I drink this delicious American pretend milk, and it's called Ripple. Actually, it's Canadian, and it's the best one. It's just so delicious. It's called half and half. So I have about 500 calories of this delicious fatty pretend milk. That's my chai, and it's my breakfast. I have to have it. Excuse me. Very delicious. Okay, because I like coffee, you see, but it's not good for arthritis. I get arthritis sometimes, so I've got to find a rich, delicious alternative. But then the Chinese doctor told me you can't make it too spicy because that's not good for arthritis either. So you can't win, basically. Okay, where were we? Reality, not tea. Okay, so last week we quoted from Lama Yeshe, who just was so wonderful, so gorgeous in the way he would try to get us excited about the teachings, These Tibetans, they're quite fundamentalist how they talk, really, honestly. They're still like 10th century. When you read them, you read Pabonka Rinpoche, he's more hellfire and brimstone than the best Baptist, I tell you. But Lama Yeshe just had a way, he saw that did not work for us poor neurotic Westerners. So he'd always pick us up and make us joyful. Lama would always have picnics and parties. We always thought Lama liked picnics. No, Lama didn't like picnics, for God's sake. He was a yogi. He thought that we needed to be stroked and loved and made love, you know, all the time. This poor, pathetic, self-pity hippies, you know. He was so kind, Lama. And he'd talk always, even he taught most advanced practices, sometimes from the very beginning. He was very amazing, you know. So we read last week from his book about concentration, some of the qualities we would have just to lift us up and realize the nature of our mind. You know, we've got the nature of our mind is so incredible, unbelievable. The potential of our mind is inconceivable, and it doesn't exist in the West like this. Of course it doesn't. You know, you don't go to your neuroscientist and they will tell you that your mind is naturally pure. It's an insane idea. A brain is caca like the rest of our body, you know, turns into dust. So there's no view like that in the West. So anyway, so we need concentration, but the point of concentration isn't just to get the bliss. The bliss is like a bonus. And this is interesting. I remember reading, maybe it's Tsongkhapa, I can't quote, but it makes sense, you know. As we've talked already, concentration, shamatha, is not even a Buddhist teaching. It's a Hindu teaching. Nothing wrong. Many of these teachings are Hindus, but Buddha took them and perfected them in his own way, refined them in his own way, right? But concentration was invented by these amazing Hindus 3,000 years ago, these amazing Indians. And so that's it's a technique they created. Well, nothing wrong with it. Buddha used it. He got as far as he could go with it. Perfect. But it's not even a Buddhist teaching. So so think about it. Why is it taught in the Mahayana path? Why is it taught at the end of the Mahayana path? It's not a Mahayana teaching in its nature, in its character. So, and not only that, but the second one, emptiness, is not a Mahayana teaching either. It's a Hinayana teaching. That's why you can achieve your own liberation in the middle scope. It's a Hinayana teaching. It's not a Mahayana teaching in its nature. So why is it taught in the Mahayana path? Why are they taught at the very end of the path? It's very curious. Because the bliss, this is not a joke, you know, because the bliss, we talked about it last week, that one achieves from realizing, getting shamatha. If you haven't got compassion, if you're only focusing on the wisdom wing, if you're only focusing on your own suffering and getting out of your own suffering, which you need to focus on, but if you're only focusing on that, you've got love and compassion, there's no question, but you're not focusing on the love and compassion because you're not discussing the compassion wing yet, then it's easy to get lost. It's easy to get lost and completely get caught up in that bliss. That's why this one Lama in Queensland, he said, coming out of that bliss of nirvana, the Buddha tapping you on the shoulder, say, come on now, let's take care of sentient beings, is the worst suffering in the universe because that bliss is beyond, you can't believe it. I mean, these words are weird to us. So therefore the danger, you avoid that danger by not having it there, and you have it at the end of the path included with bodhicitta. So then you can never lose the plot. You can never get caught up by the bliss. And this is what's hard for us to understand. The compassion of the bodhisattva. We know that word compassion. We know it easily, but it's hard to conceive of the level of compassion of these bodhisattvas. You don't believe it's true, you know? I mean, just with someone like the Dalai Lama, everybody knows he's lovely. Everyone knows he's kind. I mean, you can't help but know he's a kind person, right? But we just think he's a nice guy. We can only reflect his compassion through ours. We know our compassion is only for a few people. It's for our beloveds. And we know we have lots of compassion for our pet, for God's sake, or our wife or our children or something. We know that. We can have that compassion. We see suffering, we have compassion. But ours is so polluted by attachment, and we don't notice that because we can't imagine another level. So we can't conceive of compassion where there is not an iota of delusions. It's not possible for us. So even you hear someone like the Dalai, all of these holy beings manifest in different ways. You know, Dalai Lama shows the aspect of being a very ordinary person. He lives the life of a proper monk. He's always looking impeccable. He goes to bed early. He eats twice a day. He does all his practices. He shows the exact aspect of a good monk, just like the Buddha. It's a wonderful example to the world. The world needs this. I mean, if he was some wild tantric yogi, externally, nobody would have faith in him. Just as maniac, you know. I mean, look how people think of maniacs in our culture. So it's marvelous to have this. He's the manifestation of the wisdom wing, this perfect person. And of course, he's got so they talk about how the first level of practice, that's the external. That's that's Buddha. That's the Dalai Lama. That's what he shows to the world. Internal is the bodhisattva. But you can see he's kind and lovely, but he hides it. It's not really dramatic looking. And secret is the yogi. So he is a wild yogi. He is a bodhisattva, and he is the first level. But the one you show to the world is the first one. That's the monk aspect, the nun aspect, the monastic aspect, perfect behavior. So Lama Zopa shows a different aspect. He's also that. He's perfect example, you know. But he shows the aspect of a yogi. He shows the aspect. He does not sleep. He never lies down. Even when he had a stroke and he was close to death, you know, he behaved most unusually. He doesn't lie down. He doesn't lie down. He might not. It looks like he nods off to sleep sometimes, but not technically, because if these great yogis have got control of their minds, and that includes the Dalai Lama, he looks like he goes to sleep every night. He lies down with his blanket on him, like we all do. He's not asleep. He's conscious. He's a Buddha, for God's sake. You can't possibly become unconscious. He just goes into meditation, but he shows the aspect of being an ordinary person. Well, Lama Zopa shows the aspect of sitting up, so it's like surprising. It looks like he doesn't sleep. All the yogis don't sleep. Lama Yeshe, when you read his biography, he showed a different aspect. He was very rough looking and unusual. He didn't wear proper robes. He wore this bright pink Zen. I know one time when I was in Hong Kong and he was there, and someone, Mummy Max, actually here in Santa Fe, she was this nun. She's living in Santa Fe now. She bought Lama this amazing royal, what do you call, kimono, the Japanese, beautiful, like princesses. And there's Lama coming down to the hotel for breakfast with his round, kind of funny looking Tibetan sunnies on, his glasses, with his baseball hat and this amazing kimono, you know. I mean, it's like he didn't look like a regular monk at all. He looked ridiculous. Every woman who ever met Lama Yeshe fell in love with him, but it wasn't like yucky, you know. I remember this American girl from Beverly Hills having lunch with Lama and confessing all her kind of, everybody pour their hearts out to Lama, you know. I remember she was a very ethical girl and she was in love with some married man and didn't want to sleep with him. She thought it was naughty. And Lama whispered to her, he said, don't tell anybody, but you go have a nice weekend with him. He was just very unusual, Lama. He didn't show the aspect of being a regular monk. He showed more the aspect of being a yogi. Not outrageous, too bad. But Lama Zopa showed this aspect, so he doesn't sleep. And when you hear Lama Zopa talk about bodhicitta, when you hear him talk, you know it's coming directly from his experience. You can't just rave on for 5 hours about bodhicitta if you haven't got it. I mean, I can't talk much about bodhicitta. I can just quote these other people. I wouldn't know what to say. I have to look in the books, you know. I haven't got it. But Lama Zopa, you can't, it's hard to believe. So when he's your guru, especially because he's the one I've chosen to be my Lama, Lama Yeshe, you know, you hear these words, the guru, the Buddha has got no delusions, the bodhisattva's got no delusions, they've only got love and compassion, and you see them looking at you, and you can't believe that they have that love and compassion. It's not something in the sky, love and compassion. It's love and compassion for you. You can't believe it. You don't believe it's true, because our minds are so deluded, you know. Why am I telling you this? I can't remember. Never mind. So Lama Yeshe showing these different aspects, these holy beings, right? Yeah, the one of emptiness. That's the end. So when you've got bodhicitta, you can never lose the plot. You can never get caught up in bliss. It's not possible because your compassion overrides the bliss. You know, this is the thing about if you're on the Hinayana path, your motivation is to get the hell out of samsara. That's perfect. That's renunciation. That's your motivation. Life after life, you programmed your mind in the wish to get the hell out of samsara. Wonderful. Then as you progress, you get rid of the delusions, you get some concentration, you get some bliss, you realize emptiness, and then and what would you be like? Again, don't forget, you'd have incredible love and compassion. How could you not? Delusions have gone. But when you die, that life that you've achieved your nirvana, your bliss and your motivation to get out of samsara override your love and compassion, and you don't come back. But if you're on the Mahayana path, you go through the same stages. But because your motivation is, I must become a Buddha to benefit all others, you programmed your mind with that motivation. Then when you even get to the same stages as that Hinayana Arhat, your bliss, your compassion overrides your bliss, and you come back again. That's the characteristic of the Bodhisattva path. The unique characteristic of the Bodhisattva path, it's called great compassion. It's a technical term, Mahakaruna. Compassion is, oh my God, look at that suffering. What can I, look at that suffering. It's unbearable. That's compassion. Great compassion is, what can I do? It's a personal responsibility. His Holiness would sometimes call it universal responsibility. It's huge. It's a brave attitude of the Bodhisattva. As Lama Zopa, like in the Four Noble Truths, in the Four Immeasurable Thoughts, may all sentience be free of suffering and its causes. May they be free. I will make this happen. That's the attitude of the Bodhisattva. This brave attitude, unbelievable. So you can't lose the bliss here. So the compassion, the emptiness right at the end. Bliss, the concentration, which brings us incredible bliss. That's a bonus. So the real point, and then finally emptiness. So you can't lose the plot because you're combining it with bodhicitta. You're perfecting the two wings at the end. Okay, so throughout the path, everything is leading us to this. This is, even in the monasteries, I remember doing the biography of Geshe Lama Kontrok. I might have read out from him some point. This amazing, great yogi, a friend of Lama Yeshe's from Sarah J. When he left the monastery in 59, he went straight up to the mountains and disappeared. Lived in bliss. Lama Zopa said he lived in Vajrayogini's pure land. Geshe Lama Kontrok, this amazing practitioner, lived in the caves, naked, no food, no sleep. He lived on the air. There's a Tibetan medicine, doctors make this pill called chulen. Lama Yeshe used to get us to try and do retreats on them. Chulen, taking the essence. The Tibetan doctors and the lamas, you can get the essence from all the plants and the flowers, and then these yogis who meditate for years can live on these pills, take the essence, and they don't need food. They get very skinny, but their mind gets very clear. Well, Lama Geshe Lama Kontrok didn't even need that. He lived on the wind chulen. He was able to extract the essence from the air, because that's the four elements. He was so sublime. He ate the air, basically. So he lived for years naked in these caves, and eventually he came to Kopan Monastery, So again, why don't I mention him? Geshe Lama Kontrok. That's right. When I was doing his biography in the chapter about his life in Sarah and all the training there in all their philosophical studies, it all leads to the middle way. The teachings of 4 years studying the middle way. And he said, it's like your hair is on fire. It's so intense, you can't even stop to put the fire out. Everything in all the teachings, starting with Dura, leads you to this. And then the 4 intensive years of the middle way, really looking at the view. All the teachings lead to that, Everything is all beautifully organized, starting with controlling your body and speech. The explicit teaching in junior school is control your body and speech. The implicit teaching, I put it this way, is it's the first level of dependent arising. We're going to talk about that today. Cause and effect is an example, a perfect example. Cause and effect is the example. Karma is a perfect example of the first level of dependent arising, which is cause and effect. So beginning to understand karma at the beginning explicitly is to stop you from harming others so you don't suffer, but you begin to loosen the grip of ego grasping. Less self-pity, you get stronger. And then you get to the mind in middle scope. Now you start to understand the unique view of the Buddhas about how these delusions are misconceptions, how they're liars. This is what we have to learn. And this prepares us now beautifully for understanding ignorance, getting to the root delusion. So let's talk about the root delusion. Okay. All this, we're loosening the grip all the way through, harnessing our body, our speech, getting to the branch delusions, calming them down, making this amazing shift in the mind where we develop this amazing love, compassion for others, realize we're all in the same boat, which continues to loosen the grip of ego grasping. It's not explicit. As you get love and compassion, this loosens the grip of your self-centeredness. Of course it does, which loosens the grip of ego grasping. So here on the compassion wing, when we're doing the compassion component, the main delusion, okay, in the first stages of practice, we can argue the main delusion is attachment, which is getting what I want. So it shifts in the bodhisattva path when we do the compassion component. The main delusion there is called self-cherishing, or simply called selfishness, putting me first. So self-cherishing is not the same as attachment. It's like a consequence, but they're both a consequence of having ego grasping. So ego grasping is the kind of colloquial term for the root delusion, which we're about to discuss. The root delusion is called ignorance, ma-rigpa, the primordial misconception about the very nature of me and everything else. It's a misconception. So because of that misconception, one, we get attachment to get what that me wants. The main enemy in the first stages, the wisdom wing, is attachment. Now on the compassion wing, we shift the emphasis. And now we realize that the main problem here that has to be conquered is another consequence of ignorance, which is to put me first. And that's called self-cherish, or simply called selfishness. So we're trying to make that shift and try and, which, as we say, exchange self for others. So we're trying to conquer attachment, and we're trying to conquer self-cherishing. And these lead us now to get us to the root delusion, to conquer it, which is the assumption, which is the assertion of a self in the first place. That's the main mistake. That's the one that in our world, the idea that it's a mistake that you're a separate person sounds like complete dementia. We'd be locked up and called mentally ill if you asked a therapist to give you a technique to stop being a separate person. I think you're just nuts. But this is what Buddha's saying. As Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, the very positing of I implies other. And when you're a Buddha, finally, the final one you cut when you're a Buddha is the sense of a separate sense of self. Finally, there's not that. It's very hard to imagine this. It almost seems almost ridiculous, And all of this is coming from the root delusion, ignorance. So what is it? Well, like we learned in high school, I have to drink my tea, otherwise it gets cold. And then what's the point of drinking cold tea? You can see I'm not renounced yet. Or what I would do is I won't have it and then I'll heat it up later. I'd rather have it hot than have any. I'd rather have none than have it not hot. Shows how really I'm not renounced at all. Okay. Okay. What's ignorance? Well, we learned in high school about how there are these 3 divisions of states of mind: the neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, fear-based ones that are completely insane, that we think are normal in our world, but Buddha says they're just mental illnesses, basically. And that's a really good term for afflictions. The Indian term, the Sanskrit word, affliction, a mental affliction, Geshe Zopa calls them that. Well, what's a mental affliction? It's a mental illness, a good term. Very shocking, but it's exactly right. So we learn about these, and we learn how they're completely different from the virtues, from the goodness, from the qualities of kindness and love and compassion. These are valid states of mind. The mental illnesses or delusions are not valid states of mind. It's a good way to put it. Then you've got the third lot, the mechanics, as I like to call them. They're called neutral. That misleads us. They're the mechanics. They cause us to function properly. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good intention, attention, discrimination, good memory, etc., etc. So these we develop in concentration meditation. We hone them to a degree of brilliance. So now, we've learned, this is in the middle scope, when we learn low rig, we've learned about these different states of mind. And this is the key job of being a Buddhist, which we especially do there, begin it, of distinguishing between the neuroses and the virtues. At the moment, they're like a big soup of emotion for all of us, So now we get to the root one. So we've already learned that the key function of these unhappy states of mind is that they're liars, they're misconceptions. They're that word you use in Spanish. They cheat you. There's a word they use in Spanish, whatever that is. So Spanish will know. What is the word? Doesn't matter. Kelsang's telling us the word in Spanish. It's the word they use for delusions. It's like liar or cheat. That's exactly what they do. So when we learn about that, we learn about how attachment is a cheat. And why is it a cheat? Why does it cheat us? Because attachment in the mind over-exaggerates the deliciousness of the object that we're hungry for. Why are we hungry for it? Because we feel like we're empty. Then anger over-exaggerates the ugliness of the object when they don't do what our attachment wants. And all the other delusions all have the same function. They all lie in a particular way. So we're lost, we're confused. And then we believe in these lies. As Lama Zopa says, it's bad enough that we have these delusions that cause things to appear the way they don't exist. Bad enough that these delusions cause things to appear the way they don't exist. But the killer is we believe them. And we're going to talk about this now. That's a habit from eons. We believe in what we see. This is what paralyzes us in samsara. So already in the middle scope, we're loosening the grip of attachment, not believing that boy is the one who's going to make me happy, not believing that cake will bring happiness. You see it happening in your mind and you feel the hunger, but you say, your wisdom says, don't believe it, Robina. It's a lie. This is like putting atomic bombs under the delusions. So now we're ready to look at the root one. So what is the root delusion? It's called simply ignorance, ma-ripa, unawareness. So if it's a liar, what is it lying about? So the branch delusions have their own job. Attachment exaggerates deliciousness. Aversion or anger exaggerates ugliness. Pride exaggerates your good qualities. Low self-esteem exaggerates your bad qualities, and so on and so forth. They always distort. They're not valid. They're not accurate states of mind. Don't think it as a moralistic idea. This is a practical, technical one. They're not accurate in their assessment of reality. Now, ignorance is the root of all of these, the root. So, of course, if you cut the root, all the others crumble, don't they? But we've got to get to the root slowly because it's too subtle. That's why we go through the stages of the path. So, this ignorance is it's, ignorance in general is a pretty simple thing to talk about. When you're ignorant of something, you don't know what is right. You don't know something. It's pretty straightforward. Now, if that was the ignorance we had about the I and everything else, the actual, like the fundamental status of things. Attachment is specific in exaggerating the deliciousness of things. Anger is specific in exaggerating the ugliness of things. Well, ignorance, it exaggerates the very ontological status of the thing. It's fundamental. So if we were simply ignorant, like, I always use a simple example. I haven't got my thermos today, so I can't use my thermos. But I've got an orange mala. Let's say you say to me, what's that, Robina? The color, I'll say, I don't know. That's simple ignorance. And that ignorance is easy to fix because I simply am stating I don't know. And you can tell me the truth. And I'll say, oh, thank you very much. I understand now that color is orange. But that if we had that ignorance, we could get enlightened, I think, in a couple of years. Because we're very clever. We could listen to the teachings about reality and we'll quickly get it and we'll get enlightened. But that's not the thing. The trouble with this ignorance, it's like double ignorance. It's not only do I not know it's orange, but I believe it's blue. A simple example. In other words, not only do I not know the truth, I believe in a lie. Not only do I not know the truth, I believe in a lie. And I've been believing in that lie for eons, so much so now that it appears blue to me. And this is how we are locked in samsara. So, ignorance then is very clear. The lie that ignorance tells us, the lie that the branch delusions tell, again, I'll say it, there's a cake there. Now, first of all, you've got to establish what is existing conventionally. We're going to discuss this ignorance and how to conquer it in the framework of the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. So everything conventionally has a particular status. Things exist conventionally. So to start discussing how things exist ultimately, we first have to establish what we're discussing even conventionally. So let's just discuss a cake. What's a cake, Mummy? Well, so let's give me the definition of a cake, I'd rather use the example of a cup. Cups are better. No, I haven't got a cup, not my thermos, but a cup. What's that? We want to understand the nature of everything existing, okay? So we've got to first establish what is existing conventionally. What is that, Mummy? It's called a mug. And I ask her for the definition. Well, the definition has two parts. One tells you its conventional characteristics. Well, as you can see, sweetheart, she'll say, it's a flat-bottomed clay container. I can see that. So I'll work it out. I'll get it. But I'm not, and this is the crucial point. When it comes to ignorance and emptiness, this is really a major point. But Mummy, what is it? What does it do? What's its function? What's its job? Even what does it mean? The meaning of something is what its function is. Think about it. What does it mean? Well, darling, it holds my tea. Now I get it what it is, but it's not enough. She's got to prove it to me. So she pours the tea in. And I see that it holds the tea. So she's now proven that it is that. But even more than that, to really be clear, before we continue now getting on to the ultimate reality, we've got to make sure that in our ordinary world, in the world that we live in, there's no other definition that contradicts that definition. So once we've established this is called establishing something as existing. It's a conventional phenomenon. So we're really clear about what it is. We have to agree on that before we go further. We've got to agree on it before we go further. This is a conventional reality. Now, Buddha's telling us in all the first stages of practice, he's trying to get us clear about how things even exist conventionally. He says, not only do we not even know the ultimate truth of things, we don't even know the conventional. We've got all these other lies in our mind, even about conventional truth. We believe that someone else made me. We believe my mind is the brain. We believe that someone else causes my happiness. We believe that someone else causes my suffering. We believe these are all lies, even conventional, they're lies, he says. So in the first stages of practice, we're getting conventional reality clear. Now we're ready for the ultimate. So we establish that something exists conventionally. And then we prove it, and then it holds the tea. Now we know what it is conventionally. But what Buddha's now saying is that this is its truth conventionally. But what these delusions do, the cake, the cup, same, the delusions all have their own way. As Lama Zopa says, what delusions do, they decorate on top of what does exist, layers upon layers of characteristics that don't exist there. So in the middle scope, working on the mind and the branch delusions, we at least begin to see how attachment is a delusion that decorates on top of the cake or the cup or the boyfriend, exaggerates those delicious qualities. They don't exist there. So the cup that I'm attached to, the cup that is in my mind, that I'm attached to, that I see through the lens of my attachment, is not the cup there. This is not esoteric, it's obvious. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We all know that. Our mummies taught us that. There's a profound statement. That's a statement about emptiness. Beauty, the view, this comes from the mind. So we project our lies on top of the thing. That's what all the delusions do that. So at least we begin to calm down the branch delusions in the middle scope, So here we're now looking at the root delusion that underpins attachment, aversion, and the other 83,997 that Buddha talks about. And this, of course, is the hardest one to identify. So what does ignorance decorate on top of the mug? Attachment decorates a delicious mug. A mug that when I have it will make me happy, that I think about all the time. It's got special qualities. And I'm convinced that by having that delicious mug, special mug, my boyfriend gave it to me, an expensive mug, or my grandma's antique mug, whatever, I put all this meaning onto it. I think about it all the time. And then its presence, I'm convinced, is why I'm happy. And that's why if I lose it or I break it, I have a panic attack and get depressed, because I've jumped onto this mug characteristics it doesn't possess. It's nothing, it doesn't possess those characteristics. It's not an accurate statement. That boyfriend does not possess those characteristics we believe he has. He is not the cause of my happiness. It's not moralistic. It's an inaccurate assessment of the object. So this is underpinned now by the root delusion, by the one called ignorance. So in relation to the mug, what attachment does is over-exaggerate the deliciousness of the mug, of the mug, the delicious mug, the pretty mug, the lovely mug. What ignorance does is exaggerate the very ontological status of the pretty mug itself and causes us to believe, that delicious mug is out there. This is the ultimate one, out there, in and of itself, from its own side, self-existently, all these are synonyms, in and of itself, from its own side, having nothing to do, finally, this is the final one, having nothing to do, finally, with my mind. This is the literal dualistic view. Lama uses that term a lot. There's the mug out there, a delicious mug out there, in and of itself, set in stone, delicious, as if deliciousness is part of the clay. When you made the mug, you added a spoonful of deliciousness into the clay. And I'm here, this innocent victim, and there's this delicious mug begging me to have it and possess it and own it and believe in it. That's the function of ignorance. That's the final one. The Buddha teaches three different levels of dependent arising is the colloquial. No, dependent arising is the term used for conventional truth. Conventional truth. Emptiness is the shorthand. The shorthand for ultimate truth. The way things exist ultimately is emptiness. So we've got to unpack these terms. So conventionally, there is a mug. It is a mug. We've verified it. We've proved it conventionally. But what we don't realize is that we are even already decorating on top of that mug this inherent characteristic of being an intrinsic mug from its own side out there. That's the mistake we're trying to conquer now. Forget the attachment one. We've already handled that one. So there are Buddha teaches three levels of dependent arising. Three ways of presenting how things exist conventionally, how things exist dependently, how things exist in dependence upon various factors. And each of these, each of them is an argument a debate with previous views that he got, that he left when he diverged in his own direction from the other Indian views, his genius yogis. He was arguing with those views. So the very first one is argued is that everything comes into existence in dependence upon causes. And this is arguing with the view that there is an inherent, intrinsic, self-existent, a permanent, uncaused me or self. It's the first argument. And that, so cause and effect is an argument with that. It's a debate with that. That's the first argument. The next one, more subtle, and I want to go into this one next in relation to the self, but it's not the subtlest one yet. It leads us to the final one. This next one in relation to the self, because that's another phenomenon. The world consists of phenomena. When you first study Buddhist philosophy, you learn all these different terms for that which exists, and you learn the structure, kind of the worldview, Buddha's worldview. It's in a text called Dura, or Collected Topics. And the very first thing you learn the terms for that which exists. And why does Buddha concerned about that which exists? Because he's saying right now, the delusions in our mind are clinging to things that don't exist. So his key job for us from the beginning to end is to sort out all the facts from the fictions. So established base is one of the synonyms, a phenomenon, an object of knowledge, an existent. These are 5 synonyms for what exists. And these are crucial. So we're trying to establish what does exist. So there's a phenomenon called a mug. We establish that. We give it a definition. We agree upon it, and then it functions. We talk about a computer. We talk about, and there's millions, isn't there? Trillions of phenomena. And every day we're creating new phenomena, are we not? I mean, since Steve Jobs, I think the world has doubled in phenomena. Look at all the apps alone. There's trillions more phenomena in the world now. We create them all, right? So a phenomenon, an object of knowledge, an existent. So one of those is called me, self, I, person. These are all synonymous. We're one of those. We're not a mug. We're not a toilet. We're not a computer. We're a person, an I, a self, a me, a myself. These words are all synonymous, okay? So let's discuss that phenomenon, how it exists. At the second level of argument, the second discussion Buddha has, how he's arguing with the deep instinctive mistake that ignorance causes us to believe that there is in here somewhere, definitely, without exception, walking, as my friend Pende says, walking hand in hand with all the other bits and pieces. There's a particular bit walking hand in hand with all the other bits, a special bit called me. I. That's the term we mostly use, I. I or me. We believe that with absolute certainty. This is not the subtlest meaning. This is not the subtlest meaning. But this is a powerful argument we need to do first to prepare our minds to get to the subtlest one. So so we have to analyze this view first, okay? This is one we want to kind of break down. Okay, the latest example these days I like to use is like the example of going to IKEA and buying a table. Buy a table. You buy a table, or you buy a cupboard, or you buy something complicated. You buy whatever. And you see the picture of it, and you want to buy one. You get all excited, and you go into shop, and they give you a box, and it's got lots of bits and pieces in it. This is such a good example. So let's pretend you go to IKEA and you're going to buy a me. You're going to buy a Rebecca. You're going to buy a Robina. You're going to buy a Ciliana. One Ciliana, please. So you get a box. This is a really simple example. You do the analysis. This is the analysis we need to do, the precision and clarity of analysis of dependent arising. As Lama Yeshe paraphrases Tsongkhapa, who's quoting Buddha, dependent arising is the king of logics to prove emptiness. These two truths go perfectly together. Dependent arising, conventional, is the king of logics to prove the ultimate, emptiness. So, this is the second of these discussions. Not the subtlest yet, but it's a really powerful stepping stone. So, when you get that box, when you get that container full of the bits and pieces of you, and this is a really good way to look at it. This is the analysis we need to do. This is the analysis we need to do to have the precision and clarity to look at the parts, because the logic of the second one is that all phenomena, including the I, the person, exist. All phenomena in the universe, without exception, exist in dependence upon their parts. Everything exists in dependence upon their parts. And among those parts, you will not find one iota of that thing, because the thing is nothing other than the makeup of those parts. So the thing we're discussing here is me, person, I, self. So you get a box and you bring it home. This is really a good discussion. And and you know very well that IKEA have not just chucked in 4 legs and 3 noses and you cross your fingers. You've got the exact number of screws for the table. You've got the exact number of legs. They've worked it out exactly. They've made the table and then deconstructed it and put it in the box. Well, they've got the whole you and they've deconstructed it and put all the bits in the box, and you've got to construct. There's not a joke. So you know very well you've got to follow the instructions. Of course, there are going to be thousands of parts. And what are those parts? Well, there are 2 main parts. There's the body and there's the mind. So we can see the body is made of millions of parts, and you've got to have exactly each piece. Each piece of your hand has its own job. The thumb has a particular job. Each piece, and all together, is it not true? All together, all the body parts are all put together. They'll make the perfect function of a good body, you know. You don't have nose over here and 3 ears or something. Each does its bit. Now you've got the mind, the main one, right? And all the mind has parts as well. The mind is made up of mental states, and the mind is made up of sensory consciousness. And the mental consciousness is made up of millions of parts: anger and love and kindness and jealousy and compassion and generosity and good and bad and blah. There are millions of parts. And each part, when you put that table together, you've got to know, got the map, you know exactly where each piece functions. So the same with me. So you've got to, this is like reversing the process of looking for the piece called I, because we believe, as we're constructing this me from all the pieces in the IKEA, we're convinced we're going to find eventually the main part, the special part, without which it won't be me. And that part is called me, I. Now look at our language. This is how it's described by our language. I did that. I have a nose. So there's 2 main mistakes we make, and this is the first one we're going to argue with. The 2 main mistakes we make are that either there is, and this is the argument here, that in that box you will find along with the nose and the ears and the eyes and the pee-pee and the caca and the blood and the ligaments and the nerves and the fingernails, you're going to find a very special part, a main part called I in there somewhere. You're going to look for it. And you're convinced it's there. And we talk like that. The owner, it's like the owner of the other parts, the important boss part. We say it that way. So listen to this example. We will say, I'll use a simple example first. And this is where we have to understand the word dependence. It's a massively important word in Buddhism. Excuse me, sniffing. So, okay, I will say, I'll make one statement. I have a mala and a mug. This is one of the arguments they use. It's called, if something does exist, it either exists as one or more than one. It's a really good debate we need to do. So I will make a simple statement. I, which is one person, one phenomenon, I have a mala and a mug. Now, if you analyze that statement, there were 3 nouns there. Okay, one was a pronoun. There were 3 phenomena. I, mug, mala. So that's called, and if you listen to me say that, your eyes will look at these shapes and colors, and instantly you will assess that it's true. Robina just told the truth. She said I, one phenomenon. 2, she has a mug, second phenomenon, and a mala, 3. So if you want to count those phenomena, you will count 3. Now, this is the point here: separate, different, separate or independent, and different phenomena. It's a very simple statement. You can count 3 phenomena. I just spoke the truth. Now I'll make another statement, and this gets a bit more nuanced now. I have a nose and an ear. So now again, count. How many phenomena did I mention? The same thing. I mentioned 3. Eye is one phenomenon. Nose is another phenomenon. Ear is another phenomenon. Now, let's get that clear. Remember, we had to establish what a mug is first before we discuss it. It's a flat-bottomed clay container that holds my tea. Well, what's an eye? An I, in this case, is the combination, put it this way. An I is the name we give to the combination of all the bits, isn't it? That's the I. That's one phenomenon. 2, a nose is that part of a person that helps you breathe, let's say. 3, an ear is the part of a person that helps them hear. 3 separate phenomena, each with its own function. 3 separate phenomena, each with their own function. Now, so if this is true, in the same way here, you have to point out here 3 phenomena that are different and separate. You listen. That means, and they don't depend upon each other. So there's a mala for its existence. It's very clear, isn't it? For a mala to do its job, to count my, to be a calculator for my mantras, it doesn't need a mug. The mug can break. My mala can function beautifully. My mala can break, and my mug, which holds my tea, can function beautifully. If they both break, Robina will function fine. If Robina dies, the mala and the mug are fine. What that's pointing out is these are 3, in the most simple sense, they're 3 separate phenomena, separate meaning they don't depend upon each other. They don't depend upon each other, and they're different. We've got to analyze these words so precisely. All of this is part of the analysis we have to do to come to the conclusion that ignorance is a liar in positing. We haven't even got to what its lie is yet. We're going to get to that. Ignorance posits, in this case, either an I that is separate from the other parts, the I that's in the box. We're looking for that I that's separate. We're looking for an I that's separate and independent, but we think of it as vaguely the owner. We think of it as a separate I. So like in this statement now, I have a nose and an ear. We have to do exactly the same as we just did before. If that's a true statement in the way we think it's true, we are believing you can point out the ear, you can point out the nose, and the third one, you can point out the eye, the piece we're looking for in the IKEA box. Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. But we believe there is. We say, I, the hurt, the pain, like you say to me, oh, your nose is so ugly, Robina. No, that's a different discussion. Sorry, that's a different one. That's another one. The other mistake. We'll go to the other mistake in a minute. This is the first mistake we have to try to disprove. We believe there is a separate piece in there. Somewhere in here, we never point it out, but we just assume it is true. It's vaguely sort of here, we think, I. And it's the central word in our vocabulary. It's the main player in all of our thoughts. And it's the one when we say the word I, in just the same way that you say the word nose, this is the point, you can go to the nose here and you can say, there is the nose. And that means the nose isn't the ear. It means they're separate and they're independent and they don't rely upon each other. For the nose to breathe, it does not need an ear at the simple level. The ear to hear, it does not need a nose. You can cut my nose off, my ear's fine. You can cut my ear off, my nose is fine. They're separate and independent and they're different. Now we think there's another one, a third one called I that's got the same status. We just instinctively believe it. But in your IKEA box, this is the point. If you construct all the pieces of I, all the pieces of the whole of Robina, put them all perfectly in the right place, you can get a perfect Robina, and you don't need to have an I. You don't need a separate I. We have made up, literally created a part that doesn't exist there, that we don't need one. Not only will you not find a piece called I, you don't need one. The nose does its job. The ear does its job. All the bits of the body and mind work beautifully together to do the job of being Robina. Because this is the final point. You don't need a separate piece called Robina because Robina, this is the third one, is nothing other than a name that you put upon the combination of the parts. That's the final one. We'll get to that. So here we've got to prove to ourselves, not just say the words, we've got to prove to ourselves that you won't find a separate piece called I. So this is one of the arguments. If there is in here a separate piece, just like there's a nose and an ear and a chin and an eye and a head and a toe and all the bits and pieces, if there were a separate piece all along with the other pieces, having their own status and their own job. A crucial point is their job. If there is that piece, then, and it's separate from the others, like the ear and like the mug and the mala, okay? If the mala breaks, the mug is fine. If the ear even stops working, the nose is fine, because they're separate and independent and different. So we think there's an eye like that. We think there's another piece called, so if there is one, if you do find a piece in the box that you plug in, that is a separate piece, isn't it? You've got a nose, an ear, and an eye. You plug in the eye and everything works. We think that. But if there were that separate eye, hear the point now, if there were that separate eye, then when the ear hurts, for example, the nose doesn't feel pain if the ear's got pain. You won't point to when you say to the doctor, I've got pain. Where? Oh, in the ear, on the nose, I'm not sure. No, you know it's in the ear, and your nose is happy. Your nose is listening and going, poor ear, I'm glad I haven't got the pain. The nose is not touched. Now, if there were a separate eye, the eye would also be looking on with the nose and the foot going, phew, I'm glad it's not me that's got the problem, poor ear. The eye wouldn't be worried. If there were a separate eye, it wouldn't mind because it's not feeling any pain. But we laugh at that. Because if you say to me, I don't like your nose, Robina, how dare you insult me? No, I didn't insult you, Robina, I insulted your nose. This points us to the other mistake, that we think the whole of me is I. These are the two mistakes we have to argue with. We either think there's an I that's separate and independent, or we think the whole of me is I, you know. The first one is the discussion so again, the first one, if there were a separate piece in that box, along with the nose and the feet and the toenails and the eyelashes, you've got to put them all in to make a proper Robina. If there were one, then the other question is this. The logical deduction from this discussion. If you put all the parts together perfectly, each eyelash, every bit of ear, all the nose, the pieces, all the bits of the mind, everything is perfect, just like in the picture, that perfect table. If you were, what job is left over? This is the other question. What job is left over for the precious little I that we think is there or should be there? There's no job left over. There is no job left over. If you put all the pieces perfectly together, every toe in the right place, all the ear, the nose, all the bits of the mind, everything is perfect. What job is left over for this I that we believe is so necessary? It doesn't have a job. There is no job because there isn't such a thing. We've made it up. It's an exaggeration. It's an embellishment. It's a fantasy. We've made it up. This is literally what Buddha's saying. And it sounds hilarious to us. We can't even hear the words, you know. This is not even the subtlest mistake. So again, if there were a piece called I, in the box, there's the eye, there's the nose, and there's the ear. Like not this eye, the self. You know, if there were that piece, and you'd have to find it in the box if it was necessary, you'd have to find it there. Otherwise, you send it back, get your money back. If there were that piece, you have to. This is the job. You have to ask yourself, what job has it got? What's the job? We know the job of the ear, and every single tiny fraction of the pieces of your body and mind all have their job. Anger, you know, does what it does. Love does what it does. The hand does what it does. The pinky does something. The index finger does something. Each piece works together beautifully to be the Robina. So what would be the job in there? What would be the job of the special little piece called I? What would its job be? What's its job? Now I need some answers. Tell me its job. What do you think the I's job is? I mean, I'll tell you what we think. We think it's the boss. It's very clear. We think it decides and does all the running and does all the organizing. We think it's the one that, you know, is the boss of all the other parts. That's what we think, roughly. It's like the boss, the owner, the creator, you know, we think that. But Buddha's saying the philosophical view that posits that I is the same philosophical view that posits the boss of the universe, which is called a creator. Both of them are a mistake. Buddha doesn't argue with an omniscient being. He doesn't argue with a superior being. He just says, you've added an extra job on top. They don't need to create the universe. We don't need creating. You don't need a creator. We create ourselves. Well, a person, the bits and pieces in here that make up the person, we don't need a boss called an I. It's like a creator. It's the same philosophy. It's the same mistake. It's an embellishment. It's an exaggeration. We've added it on top. It's a lie. The other argument is we think all of me is I. That's also absurdity. As Lama Zopa says, the label I cannot be the base. The base of a label, the base, okay, look, cup is simple, mug. Mug is the name, and the base of that label we know are the parts, isn't it? The parts of the mug, the handle, the clay, all the bits and pieces, the base, the sides, and the thing. They're the parts of the mug, aren't they? They're the parts of the mug. They are the base for the label mug. So we say, there is the mug. We say, that is the mug. Simply conventional speaking, it's the truth. But as a statement of reality, it is not the truth. It's a distortion. The parts can't be the label. Now, why not? I'll explain. Listen to this. Remember, we first established something as existing. We have to define it. So we've defined a mug. A mug is a phenomenon that does exist. And what's its function? What's its definition? It's a flat-bottomed clay container that holds tea. That's the definition of mug. Now, what's the definition of handle? It's a part of a mug that helps you hold it. That's the definition of handle. What's the definition of the sides of a mug? The part of the mug that keeps the tea in. What's the definition of a base? Another part that keeps the tea in. So handle is one phenomenon. Base is another phenomenon. The sides, if you like, is another phenomenon. There are three phenomena there. As you look at each one individually, there is a handle. It's got a function. There's a base. It's got a function. So one phenomenon is called a mug, and you define it. One phenomenon is got a handle, and you define it. One phenomenon is called the mug base. Each of them is a separate phenomenon. And if we look at each phenomenon individually, and each one has its own function. So now we say, well, the parts are the mug. But no, you can make up your mind. How can the handle be the mug? Mug is a thing that holds your tea. A handle is not the part that holds your tea. Not possible. They're different phenomena. You've got to be very precise. Or you put another way, you take the base away. We just said the mug is made up of a handle, a sides, and a base. Three things. So let's take the base away. Let's take the base away. So what have you got now? You've got a round piece of clay. And what have you got here? You haven't got a mug. You've got a tube. That's not a mug. So a base is the part that helps make up a mug. The handle is a part that helps make up a mug. The sides is a part that altogether function as a mug. So the base cannot be the mug. The label can't be the base. So what is the mug? The same as before. It is the name we use, we impute with the mind upon the valid base. I is a name we use to impute upon, in this case, Robina is the name for the I. There's a name we use to impute upon a valid base. This particular set of body and mind is labeled Robina. But we think there's an intrinsic Robina-ness in there. No, you won't find not even an atom. This is the third one, the subtlest, the actual meaning of dependent arising, which is the actual meaning of emptiness. That there is, from the side of Robina, there is not one atom of anything there that makes it Robina. You will find nothing there that makes it Robina. So as Lama Zopa says, this is the two truths together. When we've realized the emptiness of I, mug, whatever, it's as if there is no I. It's as if there's not one atom of anything from the side of the I, from the side of Robina, to make it Robina. It's as if there's no I, ultimately. But conventionally, there is an I. There is a dependent arising I. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. This is the yogi's way of saying it. And this is the experience of a yogi. So these two truths, as Tsongkhapa says, as Buddha says, as Chandrakirti, all the holy beings say, I think especially it was Nagarjuna, I can't remember. But when we start to understand, when we say emptiness it tells us it's dependent arising. And when we say dependent arising, it tells us it's empty. We are on the right track. We're heading towards the middle way. Normally, with our views, we have the extreme views. We have the wrong views. Every time we hear empty, we say there is therefore nothing. We chuck the baby out with the bathwater. As Tsongkhapa says, we fall into the abyss of the great mistake. As we say emptiness, we hear nothingness. We can't help it. That's because of ego grasping in the mind, because of ignorance. And then when we hear dependent arising, we go to the other extreme and we over-exaggerate. So here we under-exaggerate and throw the baby out with the bathwater, fall into the abyss of the great mistake. We hear emptiness means nothing. Oh, there's no I might as well kill myself. Or that we hear there is a dependent arising I, and we go, oh, thank God there is something, grasp. So here we over-exaggerate. We over-exaggerate. This is the eternalistic one. We see it as permanent there. And here we see it as nothingness. Now, even emotionally, we run between these two 1,000 times a day, you know. When things go nicely and attachment gets what it wants, we think everything is set in stone. Now I've found happiness. We will be together for eternity. Everything is now perfect. That's a function. That's a function of this ignorance that sets it in stone, sees it as eternal and perfect. Complete mistake. Complete elaboration. It does not exist like that. And when we hear emptiness, we hear nothingness. We go between these two extremes like drunken sailors all day. Middle way, so when we start to begin to hear, when we hear dependent arising, it tells us, therefore, it is empty of intrinsic nature. And every time we hear emptiness, it says, ha, that means it's a dependent arising. We have to train that in our mind. Then we are going towards the middle way, because the middle way between these two extremes, as we bring them together, finally, when we are a Buddha, then these two are simultaneous. These two are cognized together. This is the final non-duality. So dependent arising is the king of logics to prove emptiness, you know. So emptiness is just a shorthand, that's all, for what? That everything that does exist conventionally, mugs and toilets and people, everything that does exist conventionally, and we first have to establish that to be correct, establish exactly what does exist conventionally, everything that does exist conventionally necessarily lacks an intrinsic character, lacks an inherent character, lacks inherent existence, lacks true existence, lacks self-existence, lacks existing from its own side, lacks existing in and of itself, lacks existing from itself, as Lama Yeshe would say it. There's many synonyms. So then we have to ask, I wonder why Buddha's telling us this. Why is he just trying to squeeze our brains? What for? Why is Buddha telling us that everything lacks that? Well, guess what, folks? It's because we think they do have it. We believe, this is the point, and this is what's so hard to see. We can see how attachment exaggerates, but it's so hard, this one, to see how this ego grasping, this is a colloquial term for ignorance when it's related to the self. So this ignorance, this ego grasping, because of this, we believe there's an intrinsic I right here, somewhere. We've never pointed it out. That's why Buddha says we have to look for it. Just a search and much logical analysis. Precise, deep, precise logical analysis. Because, you know, it's not just spacing out and saying, oh, everything's empty. You've got to do logical analysis. You've got to squeeze your brain to an incredible degree of sophistication. And that's why you have to have single point of concentration. As Lama says in Mahamudra, it is impossible to do this level of subtle analysis until you've got shamatha, you know. The mind is not subtle enough to do the analysis. And that's the point. You don't just sit there going empty, 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 hoping for something penny to drop. Dependent arising is the logical thinking you use at the subtlest level to prove emptiness. Emptiness is the conclusion you come to from having thought about at ever subtle levels, dependent arising. So everything that exists conventionally, Buddha says, necessarily lacks a status that we think they've all got, this ontological status, the very status of the thing itself. We don't think like this. We don't have this view, you know. And even the highest levels of amazing views in those incredible Indians who went so far, he diverged. And even when you study Buddhist tenets, there are different levels, many different views of Buddhism over the centuries, for different minds. And the one we're describing here is said to be the final one, the Madhyamika, the middle way prasangika. Prasangika meaning consequentialist, particular way of seeing things. This is said to be the actual meaning of Buddha's teachings on emptiness. So what time is it? We're going to run out of time and it might need another session. Might need another Sunday. Okay. There's so much more to talk about. We haven't got enough time. So any questions, folks, so far?
Thank you so much, Venerable Robina. Kelsong has sent a question from one of the Spanish students.
Okay.
What should one do once one is able to watch negative emotions like envy and stop the gross reaction like anger or blaming on the outside, but is unable to get rid of it and continues to feel the pain?
Of course, this is completely logical, isn't it? I think the real point of that question is that we feel we have to ask it in the first place. This is not being insulting. We mean so well. But if we understand how primordially deep these habits are, one meaning of karma is simply you've programmed your mind. We know perfectly well when you practice something often enough, whether it's music or killing or anger or envy, it's a deep ingrained habit. Your mind runs to it. So, I mean, already by your very question, you should be blissing out that you have such clarity. You stated that so perfectly. You clearly understand your mind. You understand Buddha's view. You're so articulate. This is absolutely brilliant. Like you should be joyful that you've already seen the problem. Now, once you've established the problem, you simply have to practice, sweetheart. So your mistake is that you're expecting that you should be better than you are. It's insane to think that because you understand the theory of that piece of music so beautifully that you now think you have to play it perfectly first time. Don't be ridiculous. It'll take months and years of practicing that simple piece by Bach. But you've got to have the theory first, and you've got the theory. Your question was a perfectly stated question. It is clear you understand Buddha's view of the mind. Well done. I rejoice. Now you just practice, baby. But if you didn't have the right theory, you'd be in trouble. You've been playing the wrong notes for 74 years and you'll never get it right. But you said the right words, exactly you understand. So now you be humble and patient with yourself and realize how deep the habit is. And you just keep practicing, sweetheart, and learning to live with the pain of it. But at least you've done the right job. You're not believing it's true. That's the miracle of practice. You're doing perfectly. Just keep practicing. I'm not trying to joke. What else?
Jack asks, is non-objectifying compassion the same as great compassion?
I don't know. I think it's not objectifying. I think it's related to emptiness. I don't quite understand that term, but that's how the Lamas use it. Not objectifying means it's not. That sounds like Lama Zopa. It's related to emptiness. When you understand that you know that's coming from emptiness as well. That there's no intrinsic self there. Having compassion for an intrinsic person. I'd say that's compassion rooted in emptiness. Okay. What next?
Sabrina in the French group asks, is it correct to understand that emptiness is a dependent production?
No, it's not. Emptiness, speaking, okay, now let's be precise again. Remember I said before, there are trillions and trillions of phenomena that exist conventionally. And we have, every word we say, we have to establish that as a phenomenon. So emptiness is a phenomenon. The other term she said was, what did she say? Something production, dependent production. So dependent production is another term for dependent arising, for cause and effect. Production, something produced is something that's cause and effect. That's not the same as emptiness. Emptiness is a phenomenon that is not a production, is not produced. So they're separate phenomena. So that's one thing, talking about each word as a phenomenon. Now, the other way to put it, that the emptiness of inherent existence is what I want to get into now, another way of discussing this word emptiness. But the emptiness of inherent existence is a phenomenon. Emptiness of inherent existence does exist. Emptiness of inherent existence is a term we refer to its parts. It is a phenomenon. So emptiness of inherent existence happens also to be a characteristic of every conventional phenomenon that exists. So whatever's produced obviously is empty. So that's another way of saying it. So I want to talk about the word emptiness now. Let's look into the word emptiness because this utterly throws us. Okay, so emptiness is simply, it's a negating word, isn't it? I often use the example of ordinary terms, how we use about empty. We use it in our daily life. I look into my cup, about to drink my delicious hot tea, and I look in and I go, oh, my cup's empty. I look in my bank expecting my 5,000 euros and I go, oh, my bank is empty. So we know what that means very simply. It means something is lacking. And more crucially, something you expected to be there isn't there. We get that. This is a really important point. Something you expected to be there, you discover it isn't there. So you always get a shock. If you go home, you've been living with Fred for 42 years and you come on the way home from work and you just know he's going to be there. You've expected him to be there every year and he is. And you come home and all you find is a note. I've left you for a younger version. You're going to be devastated. And all you're going to notice for many years, if not for the rest of your life, is the emptiness of Fred. The lack of Fred, the absence of Fred. Who is the person who sees the absence of Fred in your house? Not my girlfriend whom I met yesterday and I haven't told her about my ex-Fred. And she's going to come home to my house. She will not notice the emptiness of Fred because she's never heard of Fred. She doesn't expect Fred. So the emptiness of something in this sense is always something you expect to be there. That's a very interesting point. It's the absence of something you've made up, or absence of something you expect. Well, in the case of the self, the intrinsic self, we've made up over eons, because of ignorance, maripa, because of that, that's its job is to cause to appear to us a real intrinsic me in here somewhere. We've believed in the presence of that fantasy me forever, for eons. We have believed in the presence of that me. The belief in that presence of me is the cause of the entire construction of all the realms of existence. They all come. As a result of this, we have attachment and anger. We therefore create hell realms, spirit realms, animal realms, human realms, God realms, form realms, and formless realms. And because of wisdom, we create Buddhahood. Everything comes from the mind. So we've made up a bunch of rubbish. So the job of becoming enlightened is to get rid of not the rubbish because they don't exist. Get rid of the belief in the rubbish. So we've believed for eons in an intrinsic me, in a self-existent me, in a me that is either the part called me or the uncaused permanent me or the final one. We've made this up. We've made up an I that doesn't exist. So in the subtle concentration, after many lifetimes of hard work and hard practice and getting concentration and much analysis of dependent arising in the way we've been talking, one day the penny will drop, as we say in English. One day you will see in your subtle concentration for the first time ever, you will see nakedly and clearly that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that kind of I. That's the realization of the absence of the fantasy I. So the emptiness of something itself as a term is a phenomenon that does exist. But what it refers to is the absence there somewhere of that thing that you thought was there. So I've just looked into my cup and I just had a realization of the emptiness of tea. I mean, I noticed that there isn't the thing I thought was there. Well, that's a simple example. Tea could exist. I notice in the bank that the 5,000 euros I thought was there isn't. Well, 5,000 euros could exist. I notice that Fred doesn't exist there. So that absence of Fred is the emptiness of Fred. The absence of something is just what's meant by the word emptiness. Absence, lack. And it doesn't mean nothingness. It doesn't mean nothingness. It means the absence of something you thought was there. It's made up by the mind. But the difference with the I is a more dramatic absence because there never could be. isn't and never has been that kind of I. There cannot be an intrinsic I. There can never be an inherent I. That's an impossibility. That's an impossibility. So seeing the lack of that I, which comes from thinking about dependent arising. So the thinking about dependent arising is the work you do, and the consequence of that is the recognition of emptiness. Emptiness is the result. Seeing the lack of that I is the result of thinking about dependent arising. You don't go, oh, I'm empty, I'm empty, I'm empty, waiting for something to happen. That's ridiculous. You got to think about dependent arising. That's the logic you use to trigger the recognition that there hasn't been, isn't, and never could be that kind of I. And as Lama Zopa says, the greatest yogis, the pretty good yogis have incredible fear, but it's a good fear. The greatest yogis have complete bliss. They finally see that the thing they believed in for eons has never existed there. And once you've got that first moment of non-conceptual, direct insight into that truth, from that second, you are climbing out of your samsara into your nirvana. You can get to the peak of the peak of the peak of samsara, like those Indians, the formless realm, the peak of this subtle, subtle absorption, which they think is liberation. You've still got ego grasping there. The karma will run out and you go back to the lower realms. So what we've never achieved is this realization of emptiness. We've had shamatha countless lifetimes. We've never used it to realize emptiness, to go all the way. We can even lose bodhicitta, you know that? Even lose bodhicitta, a certain degree, but we can't lose emptiness because you've cut the root of all delusions, the root of all universes, the root of all suffering has been cut. You've got more work to do to perfect this. You can't fall back after that, though. And combined with bodhicitta is what makes it so powerful. Emptiness of the Hinayana is the same emptiness as Mahayana. There's no difference. What makes the difference is the addition of bodhicitta, the power and brilliance and the amazingness of the bodhisattva, you know. So the word emptiness is a shorthand for the lack of something. And what we've got to get our head around is that it too itself is a phenomenon. A phenomenon is something that exists, that can be cognized by the mind. So if I look into my cup and there is tea there, if I look into the cup and I see there is tea there, then tea is a phenomenon that my mind can cognize. If I look into the cup and I notice there is no tea there, then what's the phenomenon that my mind, what's the name of the phenomenon I just cognize? It's called the emptiness of tea. So tea is a phenomenon and the emptiness of tea is another phenomenon. And my mind can cognize either. One is like a negating phenomenon and one is more of an affirmative phenomenon, but they're both phenomena. They're both phenomena. A thing that exists is a phenomenon. If I can cognize there is no tea in my cup, turn it into a noun. The mind cognizes nouns. Say like that. The mind kind of cognizes things, nouns. I will say there is no tea in my cup. My cup is empty. Then the phenomenon I cognize is the absence of tea. That's a phenomenon. The mind cognizes nouns. Now, this is the point about emptiness not meaning nothingness. The simple example I like to use is if I believe there's 5,000 euros in my bank, I'm expecting 5,000 euros. Now, if I ask you to look in my bank for me and you're not expecting anything, you're just going to tell me what you see. You'll tell me the truth. You'll say, oh, you'll see a zero. You say there's no euros in your bank, Robina, and you'll just tell me the truth. Well, that's an analogy for nihilism. There are no euros. It's a fact, though. Can be, in this case, it can be a truth. There are no euros. This is the truth. Now, when I look in the bank, for a millisecond, I will see the zero. I have to see the zero first, but it's so quick you don't notice it. But then what I actually cognize is the absence of my precious 5,000 euros. So what appears to my mind, the phenomenon that appears to my mind, the phenomenon that appears to your mind is a zero. The phenomenon that appears to my mind is the beginning is that, but the one I grab hold of, the phenomenon I grab hold of, the phenomenon that appears to me is the absence of my precious 5,000 euros. So now they're two phenomena, aren't they? One is zero and one is the absence of 5,000 euros. They're two separate phenomena. So realizing the emptiness of an intrinsic I is not merely, oh, there's no I, like His Holiness says, you chuck out all the bits, as you would with Nikeah in the reverse process. You won't find a piece called I. It's not as if, you see, that's not enough. As His Holiness says, that's not the real premise. The I isn't empty of existing from its own side because you can't find one. And you won't find one in the IKEA box. Robina is empty of inherent existence, not because you can't find an inherent Robina. It's because Robina's empty of inherent existence because she's a dependent arising. That's not the real premise, His Holiness says. I is not empty because you can't find a piece called I. You can't, and you won't. You won't find a piece called I. But that's not the real premise. It's not enough. It's true, you won't find one. You'll chuck out all the bits. It's true. When you do the analysis, they call it the 4-point analysis in the sutra teachings, the 4-point analysis. You're basically going through all the parts, like we did the IKEA analysis, and you're looking for the piece. Where's Robina? Where's the piece? Where's the important eye? Where's the piece, the important piece called eye? Where is it? There's the toe, there's the ear, there's the eye, there's the nose, there's a bit. Where's this separate piece called eye? You will not find one. You chuck out each piece from IKEA's box, and you will absolutely not find a piece called eye with certainty. But that's not the real premise. That's not why I is empty of inherent existence. That's not the real premise. You haven't gone far enough. I is empty of inherent existence because you're a dependent arising. And that's the two truths together. And that's in the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra, what it is basically is Buddha sitting in meditation at Vajra Peak, blissing out. This is how he gave some of his teachings. He's sitting out there in meditation, and then Shariputra and Avalokitesvara, he's a 10th level bodhisattva, not like a deity. 10th level bodhisattva, they're having a chat, and Buddha's channeling his thoughts into their minds, and so they're having a conversation. But it's actually Buddha's teaching. And he says at some point, what they do in the Heart Sutra, they're going through all, Avalokitesvara is giving the explanation to Shariputra about how to think about emptiness. And they basically go through the whole list of all the components of the universe according to Buddha's way of seeing the world. First of all, it's the 5 aggregates. Then it's the 5 aggregates. Then there's the 18 constituents, the 6 senses, the 6 elements, and the 6 sense objects. Then the 12 links, and then the 4 noble truths, etc. He goes through all the categories of phenomena, the categories of the universe. And Avalokitesvara is telling Shariputra, and it's really Buddha talking, that each of them, every one of them is empty of inherent existence. So form is empty, feeling is empty, this is empty, that is empty. And the whole Heart Sutra apparently is spoken from the point of view of the yogi in the realization of emptiness. So Shariputra, Avalokitesvara says, the first of the 5 aggregates, the 5 aggregates is Buddha's teachings about it presents the components of a person. The components of a person. There are 5. One way of breaking down the components of a person. And the first component is called form, which is simply meaning the physical part of us. And all of it, we have to do the same as with all of this. We have to do the same with all the phenomena. So it can be any phenomenon there. So what he says is, form is empty. And then he says emptiness is form. And then he says emptiness is nothing other than form. And form is nothing other than emptiness. Well, technically, that's not true. Technically, it's not true. Emptiness is a particular phenomenon, and it can't be the same as form. But what he's saying is, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a clever person. I'm just quoting His Holiness here. I don't know this. I'm just quoting the Lamas. Excuse me. He says, form is empty. That's true. Form, meaning body, is empty of inherent existence. Form lacks an intrinsic existence. There is no intrinsic existence in form. Form is the conventional phenomenon, and it has a characteristic called emptiness of inherent existence. Form is empty. That's a shorthand for it. Now, you could have any word there. You can put cup or eye is empty. You can put anything there. It doesn't matter. Same thing. But then he says emptiness is form. So what's he mean by that? What he means by that is wherever there is form, everything that is existing conventionally possesses naturally, automatically, in itself, right there, inseparably, there is that form, that thing that exists, has a characteristic called emptiness of intrinsic existence. Everything that exists conventionally has this characteristic called emptiness of inherent existence. It has to have, because there's nothing that exists that isn't empty. There's nothing that exists that doesn't, there's nothing that exists that has an inherent character. There can't be. So therefore, everything possesses a characteristic called emptiness of inherent existence. So form is empty. So conventional form, wherever there is conventional form, there is right there on conventional form the characteristic called emptiness of inherent form. Right there together. So then you swap, you pop it over, then wherever there is emptiness of inherent form, wherever there does exist the phenomenon called emptiness of inherent form, right there you will find conventional form. So wherever you find conventional form, wherever you find conventional mug, you will find right there on the conventional mug the characteristic called emptiness of inherent mug. You have to have both together. That's the two truths right there together. Now, to be really clear, he then says, wherever you find emptiness of inherent mug, wherever you find emptiness of inherent mug, you have to find conventional mug. You cannot have one without the other. So again, wherever you find conventional form mug, you will find right there on the conventional mug the characteristic called absence of inherent mug. And then you swap it over to be double clear. Wherever you find the phenomenon called absence of inherent mug, where else in the name of God in heaven will you find the existence of inherent mug, the emptiness of inherent mug? Where will you find the emptiness of inherent mug? Not in the sky. Oh, mugs are empty, emptiness of mug in the sky. No. Wherever you can find the phenomenon that does exist called emptiness of inherent mug, it will be right there on the conventional mug. So form is empty and emptiness is form. You can't have one without the other. You can't have one truth without the other. They come to the same thing. They come to the same thing. And then he says again, form is empty, emptiness is form. Form is nothing other than emptiness. And emptiness is nothing other than form. So you cannot possibly have a person. I, inherent, conventional I is empty, lacks inherent existence of I, lacks inherent existence. I, conventional I, lacks inherent existence. That lack of inherent existence, which is a phenomenon, is a characteristic of a conventional I. And in other words, that you cannot have one without the other. This is the perfect way, this is Buddha's teaching, the perfect way to show the biggest mistake that's made in the interpretation of emptiness being nihilism is completely mistaken. That right there in the Heart Sutra, right in Buddha's teachings, right at the beginning, you cannot have the emptiness of an intrinsic I without a conventional I. You cannot have a conventional I without its being empty of intrinsic I. I mean, we just got to get our head around the words, that's all, and then slowly the penny will drop, So emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Emptiness is nothing other than form and form is nothing other than emptiness. I is empty and emptiness is I. I is nothing other than emptiness and emptiness is nothing other than I. Whatever phenomenon you want to state. So that means conventional and ultimate truth come together, but we have the separate, they're extreme. And this is the views in the universe. Nihilism is the view that nothing exists. And then the eternalistic view, that philosophical view is the philosophical view of intrinsic existence, and that's posited in the philosophical view of a creator. An intrinsic energy that does exist, permanent and unchanging, and it's the philosophical view of an intrinsic self. Mistake. Buddha argues with those. And why? Not just to be clever, because this is why we suffer. This is the root of all suffering. It's the root of all suffering. So, as you said before, non-objectifying, it's a term Lama Zopa uses. I just don't use it. I just don't quite get my head around it, but he's referring to emptiness. So even now, right now, what we're trying to destroy in the very first stages of of the practice is get rid of all the wrong views about even conventional reality. We believe our mind is the brain. We believe there's a creator. We believe I'm an innocent victim. We believe I didn't ask to get born. We believe nothing's my fault. We have a totally wrong view. So we learn about karma. At least we're getting conventional truth relatively clear. Then we get to the mind. And we start to unpack and unravel and distinguish between the delusions and the virtues. This is the miracle of the job of being a Buddhist. And we're getting conventional reality sorted out. At least we're getting conventional reality sorted out. And then we start to have compassion, and we make this incredible view that everybody is equal to me. And then we even see them as more amazing. We got all the conventional reality. And when we have all this, it's not difficult to realize emptiness. We're sorting out conventional truth first. Now we get to the ultimate. So even then, you see, even when we've got compassion without emptiness, though, even you cut attachment, you've cut anger, you've cut so much of the delusions, you have incredible, even bodhichitta. You've exchanged self for others, but there's still the view of intrinsic me having compassion, intrinsic compassion for intrinsic you. When you've got emptiness, then that's gone. You cut the dualism, you know. Any questions, people?
Yes, Venerable Robina. Jeanette in France asked, if the I doesn't exist ultimately, how can a conventionally disturbed I grasp ultimate truth? I hope I got that correct.
The conventional I doesn't grasp anything. It's wisdom in your I. Your wisdom gets the truth. Don't make it an absolute deluded I. Your I is not absolute. Your I is not deluded. Your delusions are deluded. Your I also has wisdom, honey, and it's the wisdom in your mind you're training. The wisdom in your mind realizes emptiness, not your I. It's the wisdom in you. That's the point. That's why you start controlling your body and speech first. You control the servants of the delusions. You calm them down. Then you start to calm down the attachment and the aversion, and you become an amazing person. Then you get some bodhichitta, and then it's easy. It's the wisdom in you, honey, not the I that realizes it. You're objectifying your I, you know. Your wisdom realizes emptiness. And that's the saving grace of being a human. You've got access to some wisdom, honey. Do you understand? Any comment back from that, or was there another question? That's why we're so fortunate to be human. So all the first stages of the path, you're calming down all the crazies. You're calming down your crazy servants of your mind. You're calming down your body, your speech. You don't jump on 14 boys all at once. You don't stuff 14 cakes in. You calm yourself down. Then you calm your mind down. A miracle, amazing. You start to get some renunciation. You've got this brilliant job of getting some distinguishing between delusions and virtue. And then you enhance the virtues. And then you grow the virtues. It's the virtue and the wisdom that does the good work. And that conquers the delusions, because the delusions are adventitious. Next question, please.
Renan from Brazil asks, how can I deal with guilt? As an intrinsic self does not exist, should we cultivate compassion for all beings, including ourselves?
Well, it's not the right way to put it. It sounds nice, but it's not. But let's be more accurate about it. We could say it's true, but the stages, darling, it's stages. The first level of practice is karma. We're talking junior school here. At that level, you begin to think, instead of thinking I'm an innocent victim who didn't ask to get born, and ego grasping causes us to feel that, and we'll do everything to get ourselves off the hook. We'll do everything to feel it's not my fault. And then we go to the other extreme and we get guilt. And now you go to the other extreme and you think it's all my fault. So we're either absurd in these two extremes of believing I'm a complete innocent victim, and it's poor me, I didn't ask to get born, and it's all their fault. That's called anger. And then you turn it around, you go, oh, it's all my fault. They're both rubbish. They're both lies. They're both exaggerations. First, based on having a belief in an intrinsic I, and then you go, I am bad. I did the wrong thing. Nonsense. Be more precise, please. Which part of you is bad? Is your delusions, baby. Why? Because they cause you suffering. So guilt is useless. I did this and I did that and I did this and I'm bad. It's a load of rubbish. The same as you did this and you did that and you did this and you're bad. It's an exaggeration. So be more precise. That's why in the Four Noble Truths, in the Four Opponent Powers, you do purification. The first one is regret. You know, guilt is I did this and I'm bad. No, regret is I did do it. I did kill, steal, lie. But why? Out of ignorance. I didn't know I was doing it. So that's like your compassion for yourself. Regret. I did do that, but look at the harm I'm doing to myself and look at the suffering that will come in the future. I don't want suffering. So regret is this wholesome attitude of accountability, of being grown up. And if you like, that's compassion for yourself. That's in junior school, baby. Then you take responsibility and you own you did do it, but out of kindness to yourself, because you're idiot. You're out of foolishness. But we say, oh, I'm bad. What use is that? It's useless. There's no action. But you say, I did do it and I did do it. And then because you know it means the actions you did in the past will ripen as your future suffering. And hey, I do not want suffering. That's what karma is. And until you get that, you can't move further. Then you start to go to the compassion wing. And now you go, oh my God, everybody's in the same boat. And now it is easy to have compassion, not just for the little doggies and pussies, but for the pedophiles and the rapists and the ex-boyfriend. Why? Because they, out of their ignorance of are harming themselves. You've got to have it first for yourself, right at the junior school. Guilt is useless. It's just rooted in self-existence. It's self-pity. It's a waste of time. It's not accurate. What else?
Venerable Robina, Maria asked, do you have advice for a mother that is constantly worried about her adult children that just left home? I feel constantly attached to taking care of them.
Oh, darling, I've got one of my sisters has got 7 children and about 48 grandchildren, and she talks exactly the same. It's like she laughs. She's not a Buddhist. She laughs about it. Even when one of her daughters first left home, she would creep around in her car, checking up on if the lights are on and who's in the house with her. She knew it was absurd. She was embarrassed to even admit it. This is just the way attachment is, darling. You just got to work on it. There's no shortcut, sweetheart. It's painful. Of course it is. And again, your question shows you understand it, but you try to argue with these crazy thoughts. That's what practice is. Being your own therapist means you see the thoughts, like the earlier person said about their jealousy and everything. You see it. It's an old habit, sweetheart. And with children, it's hard to break it, but you just have to be logical with yourself and sit with the pain, and you argue with the delusions, and then that'll slowly unpack them. It's the same as my answer before about the person with jealousy. You've got to see your thoughts, be brave. They're old habits, hear them for what they are, know they're not rational. Even if your daughter does do a terrible thing, it's not going to help. You know that. So all you can do is just work on it, understand the function of attachment, argue with it slowly, and you fake it till you make it. You try to act properly. You keep your mouth shut. You try not to, vomit it all out. It's just hard work, darling. It's just hard work. Keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. Argue with yourself. Don't buy into all the stories. It's hard work, but this is practice. This is practice, sweetheart. What else?
Unless there are any other questions from the translators' sides, I don't have anything else here in the English.
Any other questions from anybody? Anybody in Italy or France or Spain or Portugal? It's wonderful to see you all.
Nothing from Brazil. Thank you, Venerable.
Right, darling. Ciliana, nothing there? Nothing. Okay. So, we just did an overview, a little overview, just some thoughts. What we can do is, the key thing that I think, the key thing with all this approach that we're describing, this is the sutra approach, it's not the Mahamudra approach, it's quite different. Is this what I'm learning? I just, for myself, I'm learning as I go along, like the rest of you, the thing that was really important to me, I'll tell you this though. I started, when I started, I was like 31 or something, met the Lamas, and I heard Lama Zopa's Lamrim. I did a 1-month intensive Lamrim course in Chenrezig Institute, and I was 31 or something. I'd finally found my path, But first of all I know is I didn't understand a word he said. I didn't have a clue. I understood his words, but I didn't get these arcane medieval concepts. I couldn't understand what the hell to do with all this information. But on the other hand, for me, very clear, the karma was so strong. My whole life led me to this point. It was the most logical next step. And this is exactly what I knew I wanted. Of course, it was clear as a bell. I had to struggle with it, argue with it. It was very difficult, but I knew it was where I belonged. That was my karma. So I finally, a year later, went to Nepal, became a nun, whatever. So then I started, because I was into publishing and things. I'd done all my life. I'd always been on the propaganda side of things. When I was in my own family, even my father was a journalist. We had a printing company. I learned graphics, design, editing, almost like my apprenticeship. Then I became an old radical lefty and a hippie. I was always on the propaganda side, always doing the editing and the graphics and all that stuff. Always, always. I loved it, always doing with that. And then I got to being a feminist, same thing, always on the propaganda side. Then I got to being a Buddhist. And the first job I did, the very first job I did for my lamas, when I first recognized Lama Yeshe as my guru, excuse me, always sniffing. I felt like the whole of my life was an apprenticeship up to that point. I became a nun. That just seemed like logical next step. I'd given up sex with girls and boys. I'd given up drugs. I'd given up alcohol. I'd given up cigarettes. What else was there? What the hell? I thought, oh, there's the nun I want to be. You know, I'd been since I was a little girl. I wanted to be a nun. Well, a priest first, actually, of course, because the men are the boss, aren't they? But anyway, I had to be a nun. So, and then I just wanted to get on with it. I didn't want to sit and meditate. That was the dumbest idea I've ever heard, you know, sit there with my eyes closed. What a silly idea. I wanted to do something. So then as soon as I got to Kopan, no, even before that, when I first met the Lamas, my first job was to do editing of the Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun, that text that we use still, you know, that they first did at Kopan back in the late 70s, early 70s, the Wish Fulfilling Golden Sun. I did a new version of it. I typed it and had it printed at our printing company. Then I dragged up these 400 copies and took them to Lama Yeshe the next year when I decided he was my guru, and I presented him this hard work that I'd done. And anyway, it started from there. And then I became a nun a year later, went to Kopan, and I walked straight into what they called the publishing room, where the Gestetner and the Roneo machines were. You know, old people will know those, like the old-fashioned way of doing photocopying. So it just felt like it was my job. I ran straight to the Gestetner. I designed the prayers. I typed them all up. I did little pictures. I was in heaven. I loved doing it. This is my job. I just loved it. I had no interest in study, what they call study. I'd hear they study the Dharma. What are you talking about? I knew it was my path. I knew it was my philosophy, but the idea of study just seemed so weird to me. I mean, I left school when I was 15. I didn't study anything. I thought university was stupid, all these idiots and stuck in their heads. I didn't want that. So then I remember I hear all I wanted to go to the teachings, but I wanted to do things more than anything. I wanted to work on my mind. That was never doubted. But to meditate, work on my mind with my eyes closed, what a silly idea. I want to work on my mind with my eyes open. Walking on the toilet, I was happy with that. So anyway, I had no interest in what's called study. Then Lama Yeshe moved us to Manjushri Institute in England, late 78. I'd just done my retreat, my bodhisattva retreat. I'd become a nun already, and I'd been doing was working in the publishing room in Kopan. I was so happy to do it all. And I was going to go to India with Dr. Nick and go to Delhi, where he was running the center there, and start wisdom more seriously. It was beginning in Kopan. And I was just so excited, found the purpose of my life to do all the publishing. I come up with all these titles. I was going to work with Dr. Nick. I was finding printers in Delhi. Then I went and did my bodhisattva retreat. And then I got a note from Nick saying, you know, that we was moving us all to England. So he moved all to England, and Wisdom Publications went there, and I was doing I worked all day, 80 hours a day, editing and publishing, and I loved it. I was in heaven, but I had no interest in study. I'd do my practices. And then one day, after the second year I was there, this first year, Lama Yeshe invited Geshe Tekchok, one of his amazing scholars from Sarah, one of his fellow scholars, you know, who later became the Sarah J. Abbot. He passed away now. He was our abbot also at Nalanda Monastery in France for 10 years. But first, Lama invited him to England, to this center in 1979, the year after I got there. And I'd watch all this first year. He was doing what Lama Geshe called the Geshe studies. It's the forerunner, actually, of our master's program, which you know is flourishing in Institute Lama Tsongkhapa in Italy and various other centers. Like a miniature version of the serious philosophical studies at the monastic universities, like Sarah, where they do 15 to 20 to 30 years of study. So Lama was amazing. In the late 70s, he created this course, and he called it the Geshe program. It was going to be 7 years, right? So I remember the first year, there I was, a nun, totally happy, doing wisdom, doing all the editing, blah, blah, blah. And I'd watch all this first group of people debating, studying, talk, blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of cynical. What the hell are they talking about? You know, this study, what are they studying? I couldn't connect, I promise you. Then the second year, I heard someone say they were studying Dura. And that name, something happened to me. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was one of the courses they were studying in the second year that Geshe Tekchok was there. So I went to him and I said, I'm really busy doing wisdom, you know, like I was doing 60, 80 hours a week, but can I come to some of the classes? Because it was the next studying, it was the next the repeat year of this course. I just was attracted by the word dura. Well, I discovered it's the first text you study in the monasteries, and it's the nuts and bolts of all the Buddha's, the presentation of all the meaning of things, phenomenon, this, cause, effect, 6 of this, 5 of that, result, all the terminology, all the worldview was, I didn't know that, but I heard it was that. And I said to him, can I come? And they were studying 5 days a week, And I thought, can I come sometimes? He said, yeah. So all I know is, I was then like 2 years since I've been a Buddhist. I was about how old I was. And when I went to the first class, I bought my notebook and a pencil. They said, you're supposed to take notes. I'd never studied before in my whole life. I did about 1 year at school when I passed some exams when I was about 15, and I really enjoyed it. But I had no interest in studying, quote unquote, anything. I just liked to live my life and do what I wanted. So I thought about things the whole time. I never stopped thinking. But then my first class, I sat down and I blissed out. It was like finally, I had found what I wanted to think about in my life. Not even the Lam Rim did it. Finally, I found. Finally. It was like incredible. I sat every day, 90-minute classes, would have 90-minute to 2 hours debate afterwards, 5 days a week, as well as my 80 hours working for wisdom, or 60 hours or whatever. I exaggerate probably. Being a Sagittarius, I always exaggerate. And I was just in bliss. Suddenly, finally, I found what my mind wanted. And what I got, I just did 2 years. And then things happened at Manjushri and we had to leave the center, blah, 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 stuff happened. And I did just 2 years. I did 5 texts, maybe 4, the basic ones. They started them for 6 years in the monasteries. We did it in 2. Dura, collected topics, the nuts and bolts of this view of the universe. Drupta, which is Buddhist tenets, the presentation of all the different presentations, is particularly of emptiness. Lorig, the mind, and Tarig, logic. And I began to do one called 70 Topics, and it became too much for me, so I gave up. All I know is now, 79, 80, 90, 100, how many? 40 years ago, something like that. 41 years ago, I did this. It's like yesterday. It feels like yesterday that I studied it. And I will never forget that 2 years is the basis of all the Dharma that I've learned, everything I've ever been able to say since, any bit of Dharma that I know. I could not be saying it without that 2 years. That is an absolute certainty. So that doesn't mean, like Lama Zopa talks about, the Lam Rim is the whole thing. It is the whole thing. But what do you think the Lam Rim is? It's Tatisha taking this from the essence of this vast, amazing, unbelievable body of philosophical thinking, of epistemology, etymology, mystics, everything. It's unbelievable body of knowledge that they study for 20, 30 years in Nalanda, and then later on in this Tibetan monastic university system that's still existing. The Lam Rim is the essence of all of that. Every single piece you learn in the Lam Rim is the essence of all of that. And all I know is when I did this 2 years of some of the fundamentals, that's when the Lam Rim became real for me. That's when the Dharma became real for me. And anything I can say now about the mind, or anything little bit that I know about anything that I say, is because of what I learned, the clarity and precision that you get when I did that 2 years. Just those texts, just that little bit that I did. And my greatest regret is not enough study in this life, It's funny, but one of my friends, Sangha Kadro, we studied together back then. And then later on, she joined the master's program in Italy. Later on, I was so jealous. I thought, oh no, if only I could do so. Even now, I think maybe I'll go and do the master's program. I think, well, I'll be 82 when I graduate. But maybe no, I'll do it next life, So anyway, all I'm saying is, and so the part of the problem is some people do the study, but they find it totally boring. They find it intellectual and boring. So you've got to know the kind of person you are. But all I know is that gave the guts to me for the whole for all the teachings. It's the precision and clarity. We never think of spiritual practice needing clarity and precision. And certainly when it comes to emptiness, it's absolutely fundamentally necessary to train our minds for dependent arising. Dependent arising is learning the details, We all know in the ordinary world, everything is in the details. We say that. You've got to have the big vision and you've got to have the details. And we know this in ordinary world. A brilliant architect isn't just a person who's got a nice vision. They've got it down to the details of exactly how many screws, exactly how many millimeters. Everything, the vision is the details. So that's dependent arising. The details, you've got to use your mind to analyze the details. So all the years I was working for the Dharma, like when I ran the prison project, like 15 years, and I was the boss. So I did all the accounting and I worked out the accounts and I did my own accounting structure. I worked out all the things, the details. And I realized For example, doing accounts. That's details, fine details. That's the same part of your mind that thinks about dependent arising to realize emptiness. So for me, it was thinking about the details of how to run an organization, thinking about how to manage things, thinking about how to do accounts. When you understand it in terms of dependent arising and you do it for the Dharma, then it's good. It's Dharma work, I tell you. I just wanted to tell you that, that's all. So if you get a chance, squeeze your brains, please, and study these texts. And then you apply it in the Lam Rim. Then you do the job properly, okay? That'll do today, I think. Where's Rebecca? Where's Nicole?
Yes,
Okay.
Venerable. After the dedication, we would like to do some long life prayers and offer a long life prayer for you, Venerable Robina.
Okay, well, let's sing the long life prayer about Lamas especially. It's really wonderful. And you can do that prayer. That's great. That's nice. As Lama Zopa wrote it years ago, apparently. Somebody asked him and he kindly wrote it. So that's good. Okay, go. So we just do the dedications. Well, let's just do, no, I'd rather do them in words. Just contemplate the meaning, please. Don't put the words up. Just contemplate the meaning. Make it real, okay? So think, here we've been for these weeks together and this day to day. And this is the point about based on karma, when we have the confidence that every millisecond what we think, just what we think, programs our mind. It's brilliant. So we should be so joyful, even though we don't remember 99% of what we've talked about today. It doesn't matter. It's gone in. And as Geshe Tashi in London says, Geshe Tashi in London says it's like shooting a movie all day. Everything gets stored in your mind. That's one way that mind works. The other way that mind works is the qualitative one of karma, you know, the way that things get imprinted. But nothing goes astray, people. And since beginningless lives, that's why we can have clairvoyance. We can unblock our memories and see the past and see the future. That's the capability of the mind. It's brilliant. So be delighted that everything's gone into our minds. So we make this, so that the motivation has been, we're going to listen to these teachings so that we can develop our amazing potential, so that we can help others. That was our motivation at the beginning. At the end here, it's like two bookends. The end, we remember that motivation. We say, this is dedication. We say, well, you know, why have we been listening to all these teachings? Why are we sowing all these delicious seeds? So that I can become a Buddha. And when I do become a Buddha, why is that for? So I can help others. That's what dedication means, just reminding ourselves of our motivation. So we think that way and we delight, okay? And the other one from those two questions I really got, what do I do to deal with the envy and what do I do to deal with the attachment? It's the same thing. Have the right understanding of it, have the right analysis, then you have to be practicing patience, of working every day and live with the pain of the attachment, live with the pain of the delusions, but don't buy into them. That's the radical shift you have to do, because you understand it and you can move forward and you can be certain that as you keep practicing, the delusions will diminish and the virtues will strengthen. That's the logic. Never forget it. Never give up on yourself and therefore others, okay? And may bodhichitta, this amazing aspiration, that's the culmination of incredible compassion. It's not equivalent to compassion. It's the result of compassion. It's this profound shift in the mind. When only others, now, because you've sorted yourself out, you've nothing to do with it, you finished yourself, you're okay. Now you exist for others. May that never, never, never diminish, and may it grow and grow in the hearts of all. And maybe get wisdom, maybe realize emptiness, maybe see the two truths, maybe not get confused, maybe not think it means nothing, maybe see that emptiness means dependent arising and dependent arising means emptiness. And may they come together in the middle way. And we realize finally non-duality. I didn't talk more about Mahamudra, but I meant to, but maybe you get Lama's book, please, and you read it. It's very precious. That's it. Thank you, precious ones. So say the long life prayers of our darling Lamas. Okay, good. So His Holiness, by the way, today, for anybody who's ready, in the Europeans, you'll be in the middle of the night, early morning, but there's a wonderful teaching that Lama Zopa's requested from His Holiness. This beautiful poetic text about emptiness. That's in mountain time, our time. Mountain time is 8:30. Obviously, East Coast is 10:30, and Europe is about 4:30 in the morning, I suppose. But it's a 90-minute teaching. It'll stay on the YouTube, I'm quite sure. But Lama Zopa requested His Holiness, and also 50 of the FBMT people. There's like a lottery. There's so many people. There's like a lottery, and 50 people got chosen, and they're going to be the ones on the screen in front of His Holiness, and the rest of us can watch it on YouTube. And those of us in Thupten Norbu Ling, We're going to do it together, we've decided. So again, Don, our teacher here, one of our teachers here, he's going to kind of host it. We'll meet at 8 o'clock. So if you want to join us as a group together, we'll watch it. You can very well come. Otherwise, you watch it from home yourself, or you do it yourselves in Thupten Kungaling. You can do it together. Why not? Make a Zoom session out of it with each other. Be nice to watch it together. All right. So precious His Holiness, where is it? We'll say it in English. No. We say it, please, in your own languages, all you people. Okay. We'll meet these from our hearts. So the wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. Remember, as Lama Zopa says, there's all the teaching, and they all say that he is the embodiment of Chenrezig. He's the embodiment of compassion, the Buddha on this planet. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then there's Lama Zopa. He mightn't be your teacher, but he's the teacher of this organization. He's mine and some of us. But I mean, we think of any of our lamas now. We think, may they, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjushri's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. So maybe if you're going to do mine, just do one verse, darling, as we've just done one verse of the holy beings. Just do one verse. Just do one verse, sweetheart.
Okay.
Choose one verse. One's enough.
Okay. They're also special and important, Venerable Robina.
Okay, whatever you like. But just, to do a short version of my lamas and do a long one for me is a bit embarrassing.
My perfect Aryatara, who in an ordinary form are the guide for us pitiful transmigrating beings left guideless, how kind you are. May all your wishes be instantly fulfilled, and may your life be stable until samsara ends. You who destroy all the enemy of delusions, who reveal the Dharma of scripture and realization, spreading it in the mental continuum of transmigrating beings, thereby eliminating the two obscurations, including their imprints. How kind you are. May all your wishes be instantly fulfilled, and may your life be stable until samsara ends. By the blessings of the Guru, the deity, and the Dharma protectors, and unbetraying actions and their results, as well as the truth of ultimate reality, in all my lifetimes, may I only please and never displease for even 1 second the Guru, and may the vital points of my prayers be fulfilled.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much, so much, so much. Thank you, Thupten Kungaling, Nicole, and Rebecca, and everybody, and all you marvelous interpreters. You're amazing. Thank you so much.
And then, oh, okay.
Yes, go on. Sorry, Nicole.
Hope you come back and teach us again, maybe in person, but thank you so much for your time.
Good, Nicole. Thank you, precious one. Thank you so much, everybody. Much love, everybody. See you all somewhere, sometime, and keep moving and never give up. That's all I can say. Keep moving and never give up, and try and squeeze your brains a bit. It helps to learn the words and use precision and clarity. And that's what being your own therapist means, to have this clarity and honesty in your own mind. Then we can help others. Thank you, darlings. Much love.